Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me here on the Ice, brought to you by Doaks Bulk Fuels and Caisse Financial Group. On today's show, live here on ASTV, I'd like to thank Mike Stackhouse for joining me. Caught him off guard a little bit. Got him back on the screen nonetheless. We're going to talk about WHL and also the return to play actions, as well as some of the potential other questions in regarding decision-making, player development, where players should be thinking perhaps of where their next landing spot might be instead of the WHL. So please welcome Mr. Mike Stackhouse here on the Ice. As promised, Mr. Mike Stackhouse, good evening, sir. How are you doing in Saskatchewan today?
Not bad. The weather's starting to break a little bit too. It's shorts weather. It's like minus 15. So,
yay, shorts. You're one of those guys, aren't you?
I'm not like the guy who said I'm going to wear shorts until my favorite team wins a championship. I'm not that bad, but I like wearing shorts.
I do too. I'm probably gonna pull them out on Monday for the class for my kids on Monday. So we'll see what happens. But thanks for taking the time for joining me here on the Ice. Again, brought to you by Doaks Bulk Fuels. There's been obviously some wonderful news, depending how you look at it, Mike, in regarding the return to play for the WHL. I mean, we're starting to see some of those announcements. I mean, the first announcement really came down about 2 weeks ago with the Southern Division, the United States Division. 5 teams, 4 of which in Washington. The Portland Winterhawks, who finished last year in first, are the only team in Oregon. Now, they're still planning to have all 5 teams play in Washington State. Have you heard any more rumblings with regarding including Portland or not having Portland enter Washington and stay in Washington for the duration of the part of the season?
I haven't. My guess is that they'll figure it out. Either move the Washington-based the Oregon-based team into Washington, or they'll just. I guess that you're going to get me going on a rant here before we even get warmed up, but
we're getting warm, baby. We're getting grab that popcorn.
It does seem that things are moving along a lot, and it has all along. Things move along a lot faster when it comes to sports in the United States than it does in Canada. And they'll figure it out. My guess is Portland will just play in Portland, and the 5 teams will play, and that'll be the way that they move ahead. And I think you mentioned you've seen the Alberta schedule, and they're going to get going here right away, and then the Saskatchewan bubble, if you will, with the Winnipeg and Brandon as part of that. So there'll be 7 teams in that. They're starting in I guess it'd be less than a month now. So it's going to start mid-March. And they're going to play 24 games. And what happens after those 24 games? Are we going to have playoffs? I think the reality is at this point in time, it's more about player development than it is competition, to declare a champion or things like that. So I guess we'll see where we're at, after 24 games. I think, if you're going to play 24 games, what are they? They're looking to do this over the course of 2 months.
They're looking at 3 months to play the 24 games. Now, Alberta is starting their schedule next Friday, Mike, right? So they're planning to play weekend games and having like this washout period during the week for testing or for protocol or to see how teams are moving or traveling within. Now, they're not doing a bubble per se, or are they doing a bubble in Alberta?
No, I don't think they're doing the bubble.
So they're traveling, even though the Red Deer team is staying in the rink. How funny is that? I mean, that's got to be interesting.
Well, I think the mindset behind that, I guess, with Red Deer is that allows the team to really control the whereabouts of the players, right? So if you've got players at a billet's home, you don't necessarily know what's going on after they leave the rink and, when they're at the billet place. So, if you're looking to make sure that you've got your finger on it 100% of the time, each and every day. The way Red Deer's doing it is a fantastic way to do it. I think maybe after about a week, living at the Centrium or whatever it's called is going to get old for a lot of these guys. And that's why I asked, we're going to do this over 2 or 3 months. I know a lot of these guys just want to get back and playing, and they'll be just fine. But has anybody really thought about isolation for a 16, 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old young man? I mean, I can tell you as a young person, I've gone away on holidays and been away from home for like 2 weeks, and I was ready to go home after 14 days. And I know these guys want to play hockey, and it's an investment in their future and all that stuff. But I think the intangibles here, or some of the non-hockey stuff that we're not even thinking about right now, I think, by the end of 3 months, or even partway through the 3 months, it's going to take a toll. I mean, it's one thing to get NBA players and NHL players like they did in the summer to play in a bubble in Edmonton. And I'm sure that, there's going to be things for these, these boys and these young men to do, but you're in some cases you're dealing with kids, and you're going to isolate them. You're not just moving them away from home and into another family's home like a billet. You're and I'm talking about Saskatchewan and Manitoba now in particular because of the bubble. You're putting boys and young men into full isolation for 3 months, and it's not jail, it's not prison, because they're playing hockey and they're doing what they want to do, but there is an aspect of that to it, and I don't think it's healthy. I worry what we're doing to our youth and how they're going to come out of this. And certainly if you read what I say, if you've watched this show or the Coach's Parlay show that I've been on with you, that with me, it's not strictly sports. I've got a lot of concerns about young people and what we're doing to them and why we're doing it to them when, quite frankly, they're at no risk whatsoever, especially healthy athletes. I am a little worried about that and how they're able to come through that. You've probably seen the story on Cole Perfetti of the Jets, and I think in the last 100 days, he spent 71 of them in isolation to some degree. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. It really is crazy. And so that's for me what I'm, and we won't probably hear much of that until the isolation and the bubble aspect is all done with a lot of these kids. But you know what? You're right. It's good news. They're playing. For all these guys, their future livelihoods depend on them playing, and it's a good thing that they're playing. And I'm really happy that the Western Hockey League is able to find a way to do it for everybody. And I'd like to say thank you to the government, but really,
do we want to dive into that one right now, Mike? Do we?
No, because you know what? I mean, you know what? It's. The government is the one that's standing in the way of these guys playing for the most part, right? So and when we start saying thank you to giving us back our freedoms, I think that goes down a very dangerous path. But I think it is a good thing that they're playing, and I'm happy that they're playing, and obviously the boys involved and the families involved and the teams and whatnot, they're all happy to be playing. And so to that end, you're right. Yes, it is a good thing. I think there's some other societal things with regards to them playing that I am worried about, especially in that bubble scenario in Regina with those 7 teams and the fact that those, are they going to be allowed? I think they're going to stay in dorms at the U of R. I mean, if you play for the Pats, are you allowed to interact with a player from the Wheat Kings? Are you going to be allowed to do that? I don't know. Are you just, I don't want to use the word stuck because you're supposed to like all your teammates, but are you limited to within just your 20 guys or whatever it is that you have on your major junior team?
You talked about player development as being the number one purpose that the CHL, WHL is looking for having these games happen. With the course of these 3 divisions, hopefully the 4th division in BC will join in an announcement sooner than later, I hope. We don't know what other protocols are going to be followed except for these teams having to show up, especially when we talk about the Eastern Division we'll focus on for now. These 7 teams have to be in Regina by next weekend. Then they have to go through their 14-day quarantine process with very limited activity in the surrounding area. So the surrounding environment doesn't exist to these kids. And like you said, like that's a tremendous pressure put on kids to go into an isolation. And thankfully, they're doing it with the fact that they're able to play a sport they love. I couldn't imagine being in an isolation without having that opportunity to play. My next question to you, Mike, comes about with just after the World Juniors. We talked in great detail about why an announcement from Hockey Canada and WHL came January 8th saying we're bringing back junior hockey. Now, tell me why we didn't see that happen when you consider we had a bubble in place in Edmonton. We had a protocol template set up for a lot of these cities. We could have had divisional bubbles set up in January and spread this out a whole lot more. Yet we went completely rogue January 8th, and we only are hearing about this, 2 weeks later, back at the beginning of February, now that we're able to play. What was this? Was there besides saying that the government was the ones holding it back, but why were we so scared to not seeing hockey return, considering we'd seen Edmonton bubbles, World Juniors, players fitting a conformed protocol list, restrictions in place, and still we saw nothing until now?
Well, then these teams and leagues aren't going to break the rules. They're just not going to. I think they did the right thing. I think they put the plan in place, a plan that they felt was safe. I think they put a hard date on it to try and, I don't know, maybe pressure the government is the right phrase to use, but I think the league did all the right things. I think they said, look, this is our plan, this is our date, we're going to go, hoping that the government would greenlight them to go. And if the government greenlighted them to go, they were ready. The government just didn't do it. And so so to that end, yeah, I mean, blame the government. I guess that's sort of where we get into these political discussions where, I don't think anybody watching this show is going to say it was dangerous because they're all hockey people, but non-hockey people are going to say, well, you know what, it was too dangerous. And the cases had been going up. Certainly around Christmas and early part of January, so it wasn't safe to play. So we shouldn't have been playing. And I understand everybody's right to have an opinion, and if you wanted to say it was too dangerous, then okay, it was too dangerous. But I think what happens is, and it's not the fault of hockey organizers, but the reality is that, I mean, you know yourself, you've played the game, so you want to, and a lot of our hockey organizers have played the game of hockey. And so that there is I don't know if military is a right word, but there's a right way to do things. And the right way to do things isn't to kick and scream like a 2-year-old or to go out and hold a protest and do all of these things. You show respect to authority, I guess, which in this case is the government, and you try and do it behind closed doors, and you try and do it as adults. And when that doesn't work, what are your options at that point? And I think as far as hockey organizers go, we don't know what our options are once we reach that point of, okay, you know what? Cordial discussion is not working. And in fact, in some cases, we're being ignored. Like, we're not even getting to the table. We're being ignored. The government is essentially running out the clock on us. And so I think as hockey organizers, what's happened is that we don't know what to do once the government kind of gives you that cold shoulder. And my personal feeling, and it's just my personal feeling, I'm not saying we should do this, but my personal feeling is and I've been caught in this myself, but my personal feeling is that we spend way too much time catering to people that are not going to enroll their kids in hockey. They're not going to attend a hockey game. They don't care about the sport whatsoever, but we're worried as hockey people what they think about us. And I think we got to stop worrying about that. We've got to move forward and say, you know what, this is our sport. This is our game. Yes, we want to improve our game. We want to make sure that, there's not head injuries. We want to make sure there's no hazing. We want to make sure we've got good diversity in our game. There's a lot of things that we've done to our game that that has been more inclusive, and I think has included more people in our game. But at the same time, I has that helped our enrollment? Has that helped overall interest from the general public? I would argue that it has not. And so while those things are good, I think we also have to keep in mind that, we want to be attractive to people that like the game. And I think if we're not attractive to people that don't like the game, don't worry about it. And so I think that's what's happened here is that we don't want to be seen by non-hockey people as selfish or kicking and screaming like babies because we're not playing. And because we don't want to be seen that way, we don't really know what is the right way when the right way is being ignored or the government is giving us a cold shoulder. And I don't know what the right way is either. So for me to say, Hockey Canada or the Western Hockey League, should do this, that, or the other thing, I don't know what we should do. I think, again, I come back to the government. I blame the government. And I think it's the government that hasn't handled this in a mature way, because when you ignore hockey organizations or you cannot provide firm guidelines with regards to playing and how you can play, and we're probably running overtime here in the first segment, but if you've got junior hockey moving forward in the United States and they're moving forward with fans, just explain to me why we can't at least play in front of friends and relatives. Forget 1,000 fans. Why can't, if North Dakota can play in front of regular crowds, why can't we play maybe in front of friends and family? And just explain why. And if it comes down to risk aversion, if you just say, well, the Americans, they're more risky than us. If that's the answer, then say that. But then in saying that, put the onus on to your hockey people and say, well, you know what? As hockey people, we're willing to accept the risk and let us. But I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to professionally do that without kicking and screaming and all these other things that I by and large, don't work. And I don't blame hockey people for wanting to be seen in that, they don't want to be seen in that negative light. I don't blame them for not wanting to be seen in a negative light. So they're in a tough spot.
It's a tough spot, no doubt. I mean, the hockey world as well as inside sports have been silenced far too long. Mike, we're going to let you take a quick break. You've done a lot of talking. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about that risk and just clarify some of the initiatives that have been done by elected and non-elected officials, as well as, is the WHL still attractive as it was? We'll be right back here on the Ice. Back with Mike Stackhouse here on the Ice at ASTV Productions. Mike, thanks so much for joining me again tonight. We talk about, all the different circumstances to which it's not just about hockey, it's about everything else. Well, the same can be said about political governments with all the provinces and how we're supporting, junior hockey, organizational hockey, programs that have been shut down, and all of this matter. But the bottom line is, how do we introduce the sport again so it becomes more positive? How do we create that positivity for the next 24 games so that, we're seeing the light at an end of the tunnel, so to speak?
Well, it'd be nice if there, I believe there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but those in charge aren't telling us that there's a light at the end of the tunnel for the most part. We just keep hearing that, like in Saskatchewan, we just extended our restrictions for another month, even though our cases have been cut in half over the last month. So the signal there from government when you do that is that, things, I guess, aren't all that well, when they do that. But I can assure you that if we were we went from 320 cases a day down to 160. But if we went from 160 to 320, you bet your bottom dollar that they're going to tighten up. So if we're going to go from 320 to 160, why can't we loosen a little bit? So the light at the end of the tunnel, I believe, exists. I'm not sure that anybody in charge, if they believe it exists for whatever reason, aren't providing it. Like I've said, too, like, leadership 101 should be, as a leader, and you got a group of people that you're in charge of. So whether it's Scott Moe or Brian Pallister or Jason Kenney, whatever premier that we're talking about, you're in charge of the people of your province. And so your job should be to ensure that everyone stays calm. So even if the house is burning down, you need to keep everybody calm so that you can get out of the house in a safe manner. And what we've done is we're living in a house and we've maybe left the element on the stove on a little bit too long. There's not even a fire, but the element on the stove is on, and the house is full of people and we're all trying to get out the back door. That's what we've done as leaders in each of those provinces. Now, the other thing that should be done, which I believe they're also missing on at this point, is that when there is good news, tell your people that there's good news, right? Tell your people that, you know what, hey, we're near the end of the storm here, and we could be near the end of the storm because this is what we're seeing. We're seeing a decrease in cases. We're seeing it all around the world with regards to seasonality. We're seeing some other things here that we like with regards to vaccines, even though it's at a snail's pace in Canada. The reality is that the vaccines are here, and the people that need them the most are, in fact, getting them. So I don't know why we're not promoting that light at the end of the tunnel. And if we would promote that light at the end of the tunnel, I actually believe people would follow rules even better, because they would say, look, we only have to do this a little bit longer. If we just do this a little bit longer, we can see that we're almost done. And that would, I think, allow people to get on board more than they are. What I see right now is I see people just avoiding fines. Like, I know for me, and I'll admit it, I'm avoiding fines. I'm otherwise not abiding by any rules whatsoever, other than what I think keeps me safe and my loved ones safe. Just because the government says something keeps me safe doesn't mean I think it keeps me safe. So, and I think that there's a lot of people that are thinking that way. So to come all the way back to, to what you're talking about with regards to, positivity in hockey, I think we just got to focus on the fact that, look, these guys haven't played for about a year. They're playing now. They're going to develop a little bit, thank God. And hopefully we get to a situation in the fall where it's a little bit better than it is even today for them to play and develop and hopefully pursue their hopes and dreams and business careers. That's the other thing that just, drives me up a wall. If you don't have an elite athlete in your family, it's hard to understand, but this is the chosen career path for these young men. And to just have that taken away, like I hear the common argument is, oh, well, you should have had something else to fall back on. Sure. I mean, now that we can plan for a pandemic, you should have something to fall back on. But before there was such thing as a pandemic, the things that an athlete might fall back on are things that he picks up in that team environment. That's why you see hockey players and elite athletes. That's why they become police officers. That's why they become teachers. That's why they become lawyers. That's why they become businessmen. They actually learn that they're interested in those things, and they actually acquire the skills needed to excel at those things through team sports, which they're not doing at the present time.
You talk about that, and that's the development of character, the personality of a player, getting that the opportunity to play on ice and taking the skills on the ice and applying them to life after hockey. I mean, we all know the numbers, the percentages of how many players will become NHL hockey players, how many continue into the sport, either be by coaching or training. But a lot of them get into blue-collar, civil work, hard-nosed, grinding kind of jobs because that is their absolute that is what their skills are driven to become. Now, seeing this come back in hockey this year saves a bit of that. It's a bit of a saving grace, Mike. So is it's not a massive shiner on the eye, but it's a bit of a hit in the face, but it's us getting off the mat. Would you kind of agree with me on that by saying that this is, at least we can do this for the next 2 to 3 months, at least give the opportunity for these kids to play a sport and then build on those character and build on that opportunity for the next year?
I'm really worried in general about anybody in the 15 to 25 age group at the moment. I'm really worried about them. I think in some cases there's going to be some really sad and tragic stories, and almost all of them will be identified after the fact as being preventable. Having said that, I also think some of our greatest leaders of the next 15 years are going to come from this same group, because they understand adversity, and often your best leaders in life have dealt with their own form of adversity and have navigated it successfully. So when they're faced with a conflict such as this, they don't panic. They don't, which is what we see. And it's pre-pandemic, I used to joke that, people my age are a bunch of idiots, and because we're idiots, we're raising idiots. And I joke about that, but what we're seeing is that 15 to 25-year-old age group, which is really struggling, rightfully so. And some of them aren't going to make it. Some of them will make it, and, they'll be whatever. But there's going to be some people in that age bracket that didn't realize how tough they are, or how good they are at leading, or how smart they are at navigating choppy waters in life, and there will be some success stories out of this as well. And it won't be from sports. It'll be from trying to play sports and getting up off the mat, as you like to call it. But it'll be like getting up off the mat. Maybe my hockey career didn't go the way I want it to go, but that kind of a disappointment pales compared to some of the disappointments that I've dealt with during a pandemic, and it allows you to sort of go through life and become the best that you can be. So there's going to be tragic stories. There's no question about it. They're sad, and almost all of them preventable, but there's also going to be some really big success stories out of this in that age group as well.
I couldn't agree with you more, Mike, when you consider that really outside of, World War II, this pandemic truly has shut down a lot of services, creating essential, non-essential discussions. And really, this younger group has truly more than ever become more resilient if they're able to prosper through this. Mike, we're going to take one more quick break. We're going to come and talk about the future of the WHL this upcoming month when finally hockey comes back, but also what should players be thinking outside of maybe looking at different avenues? We'll be right back on the ice. Back with Mike Stackhouse here on the ice, brought to you by Caisse Financial and Doaks Bulk Fuels. Mike, we've had great conversations on the other show that I run with you, Coaches Parlay, with regards to the opportunity for playing, development, and seeing your career grow in other facets. When it comes to March 12th, or it comes to March 19th, or even next weekend in Alberta, do you think there's going to be that conversation in these small towns once again, looking and rooting to see how well their teams are faring in the WHL? For example, are you going to pick up the paper and you're going to look at the sports record and see how the boys did last night? Are you going to be excited? Is that heat, that energy going to come through the body once more? Is it going to take some time to get there?
I'm just happy for the kids. And I'm also at the point where wins and losses, I really don't care. I'm happy that they're playing, and I want them to do it successfully. The Western Hockey League's in a weird situation in that it's not easily accessed with video. Now, if you're a mom or a dad, a billet, whatever the case may be, you can likely subscribe to an online package and watch games, at least I hope, and you'll be able to live it out that way. And I think for those people it will be exciting. I think it'll be and I think it'll be emotional. I think for people that don't have an elite athlete in the house, that don't understand, you're scared. You're really scared that your child's dreams have gone up in smoke through no fault of their own. And I think when that day comes that those boys are on the ice, I think it's a bit of a tear jerker moment, I think, for families to be able to watch it. And at the end of the day, wins and losses, maybe after about 5 or 6 games, if there's going to be a playoffs and stuff like that, I think maybe you sort of get into the spirit of competition a little bit more. But at the moment, I don't know that we even know what's happening with playoffs. So it's just great that they're playing. I hope that there's an easy avenue for people to watch. I won't watch myself because I don't have a child that's going to be playing. So and there's lots on, if you don't have that, you can watch NHL. The curling is starting this weekend for goodness sake. So I mean, there's going to be lots of options for you, if you're not got a direct connection to the Western Hockey League. But I think for those that have a direct connection to it, I think it's going to be emotional at first, and it'll probably get competitive not long after that.
Do you think that having a goal in mind, a championship, even a Western Champions per se, not so much the Memorial, but having some sort of trophy to play for, does that instill a little more, heat, a little more emotion into these games to play your best game in and game out, knowing that it's only a 24-game season and potentially a small playoff?
I think anytime you get something to play for, there's more on the line. It is good and it's better. But I also think by and large, these guys know that their careers were taken out from under them, and knowing that happened to them is enough to keep them motivated, because every game might be my last. And I think that'll be the mentality for most of them, and that'll be how they approach it. And I think the games will be really good. I watched when Junior A was going for the first 5 or 6 games that they had of a season. The preseason games in Junior A were awfully competitive, because I think those guys were just hungry to play, hadn't played in so long, and were thankful to be out there and appreciated every moment that they had.
I think that hunger will return quicker as well. In terms of this shortened season, what do you expect from, players that are not necessarily in that top 6? Like when they look at their opportunity to play Western Hockey League hockey, do you think that they might be looking elsewhere to play, or considering I'm finishing high school, maybe I should go right into the fact that I should plan a second or a backup plan, so to speak, even though I can still play a pretty competitive game?
I don't know how, with a Western Hockey League player, I don't know. Like, to me, if you're in the Western Hockey League at all, you got to be thinking you got a shot, right? Even if it's not a, if you're Connor Bedard, you've got a much greater chance than a 19-year-old who's going to be on the third line for sure. But the reality is if you're in the Western Hockey League, you've got a shot. So I would like to think that, if you're serious about your hockey career, you're going to give it your all and stick it out and get what you can out of it for as long as you can. And I know we're not talking Junior A, but if you were to make that same comment or pose that same question to me from a Junior A perspective, if you're a 19-year-old or a 20-year-old Junior A player and you're a third liner, and you've already come to terms with reality that when junior is done, that's it, for you as far as a highly competitive hockey player. I would think the thought of a bubble is very unattractive, and it might push you out the door quicker than what many people think. So I think, and I've heard some people talk about bubbles and stuff in the Junior A realm of things to try and get them back on the ice. And I think, again, for kids that are still chasing scholarships and think they've got a real future in the game, it's not a bad idea to try and figure out a way to get on the ice. But there are some guys, and I've talked to them. There's some guys that like, hey man, I'm just prolonging, my hockey career for as long as I possibly can, and enjoying it for as long as I can. Well, for those people, a bubble really isn't all that enjoyable. But
Right.
I think for what you're asking with regards to major junior, I mean, there's always going to be the odd guy that just says, you know what, I'm sour on what's gone on here over the last year, and I'm done. I'm not interested in doing this. So, and we might see a couple of those, as teams go back to play. I don't rule that out for sure.
We certainly are looking forward to the bubble scenario in the East, Alberta getting their division together, the U.S. division, hopefully the BC soon. Have you heard, or do we think that there needs to be any inclusion with regards to the O and the Q and seeing those leagues start up as well?
Well, I think the Q is going.
Right.
Some of those teams played 20, 25 games already. And I'm a Maritimer. I grew up in New Brunswick, and it's interesting to see mindsets of people. I've still got New Brunswick friends on my Facebook list, and to sort of get into their heads a little bit on how they see all of this compared to those of us in Western Canada. And sometimes it is drastically different on how we view things. But that league, by and large, has been playing, and I think they've even played enough games to this point that you probably could get somewhat of a read on, evaluation with regards to players. Ontario, to me, we're live, so I'm gonna make sure I don't say something I shouldn't. But
it's confusing. Let's call it that.
I don't think Ontario's going to play at all. I can't see it.
Well, we're sure to have those conversations next week as well, Mike, as you join me on the parlay, which we'll touch on that because Ryan will love to poke the bears, so to speak. But Mike, I want to thank you very much for your insight and your comment regarding, how this is not just about playing hockey. This is about athletes, young athletes. We're molding them. We're trying to make them into great players. And the bottom line is we are seriously, in a bit of a interesting place to see what's going to transpire in the upcoming years to this generation. And I truly think that through all of it, I hope that we have some resilient young men and young women that are ready to not only be great citizens, but perhaps lead the league and lead society in a better direction. I want to thank you, Mike, for your time. I really appreciate it.
Well, I want to thank you for having me on. I think for anybody watching too, I think it's important for me to say I'm actually at the moment not aligned with anybody as far as hockey goes. And I'm not aligned with anything. For me, from day one, I've got 3 kids. The oldest is 19. The youngest is I don't know how old she is. She's in grade 8, 13 or 14. Typical dad. I don't know how old my daughter is. But my 19-year-old played junior football as a rookie. He missed last season. I don't know what holds this year. So I have that aspect with regards to an elite athlete. But for me, it's about what I see in society, and I am engaged in the political side of things with regards to having a strong interest in it. And I'm very engaged on the business end of things with what's happening to those people. And I think what's happened is we've decided to look at everything through a single COVID lens, and we can't do that. And at the same time, we can't look at everything through a single sports lens, and we can't look at everything through a single business lens where someone says, well, my business needs to be open. What we need is balance. And the only way to achieve balance is to recognize that, some people are going to get COVID and they're going to die, and that's sad. And we should try and prevent as many of those deaths as possible from happening. But while we're preventing those deaths and trying our best to prevent those deaths, we should also be looking at our young people, because that's our future. And those are also the people that are at least risk of this virus. But those are also the people that we're destroying the most. And so we need to find balance so that we're not destroying those people, yet at the same time, we're protecting as many people as we can protect. And I'm not advocating full arenas, and I'm not advocating casinos are open to full patrons, and I'm not advocating for restaurants and bars to be open at 100%. And I'm not saying that we should be fully open. I'm saying that we need to look at this from a much, much, much better balanced position and accept the fact that, yeah, you know what? You're maybe not going to be able to do sports the way that you've always done sports. You might not be able to have the business that you've always had and make as much money as you've always been able to make. Some people are going to lose their jobs. Some people can't play sports. Some people are going to get COVID and they're not going to have a good outcome. I think we just have to accept that there's going to be tragedy in every walk of life, but let's limit the tragedy in every walk of life instead of trying to eradicate COVID and creating just the unspeakable carnage and destruction that we have created by just looking at it through that single lens.
Mike, I want to thank you again. Looking forward to seeing some hockey return, especially for the men and the young men that have a chance to play next weekend. Alberta should be fun, and then looking forward to the rollout for the East and the U.S. division. Mike, take care of yourselves. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of the evening.
Thanks a lot.
That's Mike Stackhouse with me, Saskatchewan. Born and bred, well, not born and bred, Maritime, but moved over to Saskatchewan. We'll have to ask that question later. But nonetheless, want to thank him very much for his time and his comments here on the ice with regards to the WHL and its return to hockey and to the ice in the upcoming months. Don't forget, behind the mic tomorrow night, 8 Eastern, 7 Pacific, we'll have the Blades play-by-play announcer Les Lazaruk to discuss the East Division a little further, a little more insight probably from what we had earlier this evening as well. We'll sit down and discuss with Scott Walford. Interesting story. He's out in McGill talking about the relationship between players and broadcasters after and during and before their relationships and how they build. Thanks for watching tonight. Really appreciate it. Great insight as always. Thank you. Take care of yourselves and be good to yourselves too. Have a great day. Good night.